Hi YouTube, welcome back to my channel. I'm Bunsuke, and in this video I'm going to talk about whether Japanese actually has adjectives. So let's get into it. So quick disclaimer before we start the video. In a video of this length, it's quite impossible to go into all the details and nuances of adjectives and verb conjugations. But if you're interested in verb conjugations and anything that has to do with it, so for instance, if you have trouble recognizing or distinguishing passive forms from causative forms, or if you have done Minna no Nihongo but find it strange that the explanation is basically to take off things from verbs and stick other things at the end, then I have the perfect masterclass for you that takes place on April 4th, 2026, so this coming Saturday. And I'm doing the same masterclass the next day, but on different times so people from different time zones can join. I'll leave all the details in the description so you know how to apply, but it's basically a 2.5 hour masterclass in which I talk you through a handout that I personally made. And there's time at the end for questions and answers, and you can always email me afterwards if you have any questions. So if you're interested in verbs and why they conjugate the way they do, then please join the masterclass. Now let's get back to the video. Well, your first reaction to the question, does Japanese actually have adjectives, will surely be, yeah, of course it does. You can say things like akai kuruma or something like this, meaning the red car, and be done with it. It's quite simple. However, Japanese adjectives behave a little bit differently than, let's say, adjectives in English. And let me start explaining from E-adjectives, because we have E-adjectives and Na adjectives, of course, but I think it's easier to start the story from E-adjectives. So what makes Japanese adjectives so different? Well, first of all, the Japanese E-adjectives has the copula, so that is to be, built in. Akai doesn't mean red, it means to be read. This means that akai on its own in Japanese is a full grammatical sentence, meaning it is read or something is read. This is why akai da or akai de aru is grammatically incorrect. Sometimes you will see akai des, but in this case the des has no copular function. It just serves to indicate politeness. So akai functions on its own. The des at the end only serves to indicate that it's polite. Okay, so that's one difference. The other big difference is that Japanese adjectives conjugate, and they conjugate in a very similar way that verbs do. So what I want to emphasize in this video is that Japanese adjectives actually have a lot of verbal qualities in the same measure as they do, if not more, adjectival qualities. So these E-adjectives conjugate in pretty much the same way and following the same rules as normal verbs, following the same stems, or sometimes these are called inflections, as regular verbs. So they follow the meireke, renyoke, rentaike, izenke, and meireke stems. If you are interested in learning what these stems mean and how they function exactly, please join the upcoming masterclass, because this video is too short to explain all of that. But for now, it suffices to know that akai or takai, this form, is a so-called rentaike. So this rentaike in standardized textbooks is usually called the dictionary form. I don't like to call it the dictionary form because there are many dictionaries that use other inflections or stems, sometimes the renyoke, sometimes the so-called shushike that doesn't really exist anymore. So I'd rather call it the rentaike. And this rentaike, if you look at the characters, basically it is the form, the ke, that connects ren to tai, to fixed bodies, meaning to nouns. Here you might say, well, don't we also see these rentaike forms at the end of sentences? This is correct, but this is a rather modern invention. In classical Japanese, you sometimes, under very specific grammatical conditions, get the rentaike or a different inflection, such as the izenke, at the end of a sentence. But back in the day, meaning before Meiji, there was a form called the shushike, which means the end of sentence form. And that no longer exists, and this has been usurped basically by this rentaike form. So this is why we see this form at the end of sentences in modern grammar. However, in principle, it is there to qualify some form of a noun or a nominal form. Given the information that we've discussed so far, we can kind of rethink what akai kuruma actually means. So we usually translate this as the red car, but given the fact that this E adjective already has the copular to be built in, we can now infer that akai kuruma actually means the car that is red. Basically, akai is a clause that qualifies what kind of car it is. And in much the same way, if we take the rentaike form of a regular verb, let's say hanasu, to speak, and put it in a sentence that qualifies a noun. For instance, フランス語を流暢に話す人, the person who speaks French fluently, you can see that basically this is also a qualifying sentence. And we can think about adjectives in much the same way. Akai is basically a qualifier that is in this rentaike form, qualifying the noun that follows it. Now you might ask, what about the na adjectives? What's going on there? Well, actually, na is a short form of the classical copular Japanese verb nari. So this nari is basically a shushike form that I just mentioned, this form that is from classical Japanese that we no longer have, that you saw at the end of sentences. But the rentaike form of this verb nari is naru. Sometimes you still see this verb today. It has nothing to do with this verb naru that means becoming. There are multiple forms of nari or naru in classical Japanese. But this old nari is simply copular, so it equals modern day, let's say, da or de aru or des in its copular meaning. And sometimes we still see this copular nari in, let's say, movie titles or drama titles. I think many years ago there was this drama series called Kare Naru Ichizoku. So this naru is purely copular, so meaning the ichizoku that is kare. And na is basically a short form of this rentaike naru. So even though na itself doesn't conjugate, it comes from a verb that conjugates. So now when we say kirei na hito, so the beautiful person, what we're actually saying is the person that is beautiful. So both i and na adjectives have this copular element in them. So to make sure that this doesn't get too long, I'll cut the video short here. But basically my goal is to stress the fact that adjectives in Japanese have a lot of verbal qualities, and a lot of these verbal qualities follow the same rules as regular verbs. So maybe we can think of these adjectives as adjectival verbs. I think this is a term that's used quite commonly for these kinds of adjectives. I do want to stress here that I think it's important to see adjectives as their own separate category, because even though they follow the same rules as regular verbs in their conjugations, of course the conjugations themselves look differently, and some of the functions of the inflections are different from regular verbs. For instance, you can use the renyoke of an adjective as an adverb. This is not the case for regular verbs. So it's still kind of different in its own way, but I wanted to stress the verbal qualities of adjectives that you might not be aware of if you're in a kind of intermediate stage, or if you've followed certain methods that don't stress this. So hopefully this was useful and helped you see adjectives in a kind of different light. Again, if you appreciate this kind of more kind of grammatical approach to adjectives and verbs and want to know more about how these conjugations function, please consider joining the masterclass I mentioned on April 4th and 5th, 2026. You can find all the details and information through the link to my Substack below. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.